Hi everyone, my name is Pam Schilling and I'm the founder and CEO of Arch Career Partners, where I focus on working with ambitious professionals and organizations to help them achieve career advancement and their business goals. I'm a former strategy consultant and worked in the tech industry for a number of years and have trained and helped a lot of professionals over the last decade or so secure offers in some of the most selective and distinctive hiring organizations. I have a particular specialty in the area of case interviews and helping to share some of the insights about what it takes to be successful in this process. I've got a couple of things that I want to highlight as an introduction to the case interview practice process. And so I'm going to walk through just a few high-level points and then introduce some of the case activities that are going to follow in some of the subsequent videos as part of this series. For a little bit of background and context, just to make sure that you have some of these things in mind, the case interview preparation process, it has a lot of different dimensions, and there are many questions that come up when I'm doing workshops and talking to my clients, questions that arise about how much time it takes, how do I know if I'm prepared enough, how do I get some of the insights and the experience from my peers, maybe I'm not feeling as confident about the process, I don't know if I have the right experience to be successful, and how do I really leverage relationships to be successful along the way? And these are all fair questions. What I will tell you is that anybody can prepare with just about any amount of time if you do the right preparation. It's really about quality over quantity. When you think about this, it really has to be preparation at the highest level. The offers that are made come to the most distinctive candidates. It's a very competitive process and it's rigorous, that's for sure. And it is important to get some insights, and there's a variety of ways to get those. There's clearly some advantages to professionals and students who know a lot of individuals that have been through this process. Some of the major business schools have significant hiring that goes on, and so one generation of students passes on that knowledge. That's a big advantage. So if you're not in that circumstance, you need to make sure that you find other ways to get that information. Along this way, you do need to be confident. You need to be confident in your ability to solve problems, to think on the spot, to put stakes in the ground, to not have to have every piece of information, and to know that maybe some of your recommendations could be further developed, but yet you still have given good logical thought to it. Also, many people are successful. Consulting, I think, is a wonderful field because the diversity of the backgrounds of people shine through. And so whatever your background is, it could be art or architecture, it could be engineering, it could be the law, it could be different areas of science, different degrees. The consulting firms are known, some of them, for hiring PhDs. Experience comes in a variety of different packages, and so whatever yours is, as long as you're great at solving problems and asking questions, you're going to do just fine, but your preparation matters. A final element is really the relationships that you're able to cultivate. It is important to have some exposure to professionals, consultants, students who've gone through an interview that uses a case. It's really hard to do this completely on your own, so being able to work into your network and to find those individuals is in the long run valuable. Along this journey of interviewing, you're going to have more than just the case interview. We're only going to be talking about that in this set of videos, but be aware there's a lot that goes into interviewing with these organizations. Your networking, your research, putting together a great resume, and then once you get the interview, you're going to be dealing with cases and the experience interview or the behavioral interview. So don't shortchange any of those elements. Prepare with rigor in all those dimensions. For our purposes here, we're just going to focus on case preparation and particularly the practice element. In the overall life cycle, and particularly for consulting, I think about it in a couple of different phases or steps. Nothing too complex here, but I think it's helpful to consider this because sometimes people get a little bit ahead of themselves, and in the long run, I'm not sure that that's the best thing to do. So thinking about the starting point, step one, familiarizing yourself, and we're going to talk about how to do that, is very important, and get grounded on what is the expectation of this case interview. Also, there's a number of things that you can do in what I call solo practice. You don't have to have a partner, you don't have to have someone else to practice with, and this can go a long way in building your case skills. Another area that can be helpful at the beginning, especially given the background that you might have, is to be doing some research and review, looking at different industries, building your business acumen, gathering factoids, which are pieces of information you might need. All of those things are great foundational elements. As you progress a little bit further, then you're going to add things like practicing with a peer and, of course, some of the behavioral elements. Parallel to this are those other dimensions of your job search that I mentioned, but for our focus again here, I'm going to talk mostly about the case piece. As you then get into the final stages, step 3, you do want to practice with people that have experience actually being in a case interview, whether those are other students who've interviewed as part of their educational process, whether it's alumni of consulting firms or current consultants, but you do want to find some people that have a little bit of that actual experience, firsthand experience, to be able to give you the best feedback possible. And then obviously at the end of the stage, you're going to have your interview, and hopefully all this practice is going to pay off. So I want to mention what I think about practice for a few moments. And practice is something that I think gets a little bit shortchanged in some of the discussions about case interview preparation. And so let me define it from my perspective. I'm really thinking about something that we term deep practice. And this involves a process where you're going to practice, get feedback, and based on that feedback, do some drills and review. I see a lot of students who practice without good technique. And so when I speak about deep practice in your early stages, it means when you get stuck or when there's a mistake or something that doesn't make sense, you stop, you talk about it, you focus on some skill building in that area, and then you continue on. And you really try to hone in on your gaps rather than just continuing to practice from start to finish over and over. So think about this, because many cases will allow you to see some gaps, but at times, because of expediency, students or professionals practicing cases will skip over the review of their feedback. And in the long run, that doesn't work out in your favor ultimately. As you begin to think about your case practice, I just want to highlight a few of the available resources. And depending on the type of individual you are, whether a student or a working professional, these resources are going to be a little bit different, but we'll highlight some of the common things and where you might focus your attention. So overall, I want you to think about the network of professionals that you should be taking advantage of. Obviously, if you're in some type of educational experience in a business school or university, you have access to career services. If consulting is a robust career path at your university, there will be lots of information, but that's not the only source. Think about your alumni, the companies and the firms themselves, lots of friends and family, and then the most close to you resources as a student, your classmates, the consulting club, if you have one on your campus, the business school faculty that might have some insights, and if you have access to libraries, whether it's the university library or the public library. All these places have things that you can be taking advantage of in terms of your case preparation. Lots of times when I'm working with clients and students, I get questions about what resources should I go to and what are the best and what are the things out there. So let me highlight a few at a sort of big picture level and then give you some specific ideas. So the first place that you should always begin are the websites of the consulting firms. They have incredible resources, lots of information, they have videos. Another valuable place is on YouTube. If you search for consulting prep or case interview or the similar topics, you will find many excellent videos on YouTube. In addition to that, there are a number of well-read and recognized case books that are written by experts, people like me that have been consultants that talk about the preparation and the instruction process. Further, there are what I call consulting club books or case books. These are the consulting clubs at the various business schools that will prepare case books, and many times they get circulated and are available via some sort of online search, and you can have access to them. The most current book isn't exactly what you need. They're certainly nice to have, but even if you find one that's from a few years past, it'll be valuable for you. In addition, there's a number of online prep tools. One of the more recent tools to come to the marketplace is called Rocket Blocks. There's a lot of value in these. Some of them require a small amount of payment or fee basis, but it's definitely worthwhile. Also, don't forget some of the business publications, things like the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, and the like, where you could be reviewing news and looking at various market and organizational information. Finally, there are pieces of industry research that you can be looking at. If you're at a university, you may have access to things like CB Insights and other equity research reports about certain industries. These are going to be helpful to you. Lots of different things that are out there for you. Many of these are free. Some of them have a small fee. And then others are really easy to access when you just do a little bit of digging through some internet searching. So what I want to do briefly is outline some of the activities that you ought to be focusing on. There's going to be some additional videos that highlight how you can do these activities and integrate into your practice. When you think about practicing, I would again break this down into phases. From beginner to more expert to interview ready. You can think about this maybe in 4 phases. It begins with the foundations and really learning about how to do cases and what's really expected. There's some great, again, consulting firm resources and the different consulting club case books. Gathering some of the factoids that you need to know, like different populations and metrics, those sorts of things. There's a set of formulas that are going to be useful as you solve cases analytically. And then there's a number of different business frameworks that you're going to be accessing. All these things can occur at the beginning of your case practice. The second phase then is your solo preparation. This is where you can learn about structuring and then do some drills that are going to help you overall in solving a case from start to finish. Brainstorming and really pushing your creativity, market sizing problems, math problems, chart reviews, reading articles like in the Wall Street Journal, industry reviews, and then getting a sense of the different consulting firms. All these are the kind of activities that you don't have a partner. You can do them on your own. You can do them in small pieces, and they have a high level of return on investment in your overall success. The next phase then moves to what people typically call casing, and this is practicing with a partner. You're sitting down, you're working a case, your partner's delivering it to you, you go through it, and then you get feedback. What I want to highlight in this part of the process for you is really taking that feedback and listening, reviewing, and evaluating it very deeply. Then, based on the feedback, you can identify your gap areas and doing some drills on those gap areas. That feedback process and drilling is crucial because if you keep going from case to case, you don't get a chance to learn from your mistakes. So the iteration steps are crucial. In this process of casing, you want to think about variety of cases. You want to think about working through different industries, different types of problems, different types of questions, different types of analysis. Also, as you progress, you want to practice with more and more experienced individuals. If you happen to be in the business school environment, the first thing is to practice with your peers. Then you can practice with returning second years. If you happen to be a first year, then you can practice with alumni and current consultants. So really take advantage of all those different experience levels. Final stage, you should polish your case solving. This includes focusing on the conclusion, which is the last part of the case, making sure that you have really good note-taking techniques to use that to your advantage, being more efficient and direct in solving the case, pushing your insights and creativity. Those are kind of the final pieces that can, again, distinguish you from another candidate. As you think about where you are now, there are some great activities that I think are valuable and interesting and efficient in terms of your case solving. Some of this has to do with just reading and continuing to build your business acumen. So I've mentioned a few times reading the Wall Street Journal and various other business publications. This is just a must. Something else that I think is really fun and interesting, listening to podcasts and business television. There are great podcasts, just a few of my favorites: Freakonomics, Masters of Scale. There's also some things that I listen to that deal with sociology and psychology, like Hidden Brain, and other individuals who speak to various business topics. So podcasts are a great way to be learning while you're doing other things. And then in business television, you never know what you can learn from shows that are kind of reality TV oriented, but they're still super insightful. Finally, there's some things that you can be doing to look at your business acumen. These are different topics like strategy and marketing and operations. And although you may have learned these in school, it still isn't a bad idea to go back through and review it. Now, many people will say you don't need to know specifics about industries in order to be successful in cases. I agree with this, but I also think it doesn't hurt to understand industries, to think about the different value chains, some of the metrics that define those industries, and some of the factors that are driving that industry or particularly driving change in that industry, and some of the trends. This isn't the kind of information that you memorize per se, but having a familiarity with it can be useful. A lot of times what I see happen too early in practice and preparation is people just exclusively doing partner cases. So I equate this to you want to be a tennis player, and so you just go out and play a tennis match. Rather than doing some of the practice drills that are necessary, hitting with a ball machine, running and doing sprints and doing racket activities, you're trying to practice at a much higher level. So I would save that until you've got a little bit of some of these foundational pieces under your belt. So if you're just beginning today or tomorrow and you really want to think about where to begin your practice, there's a couple of things that I would highlight. So first is I would just take a look and make sure you have a good understanding of different financial ratios and formulas. This can be useful as you get into some of the analytic elements of solving a case. The other thing is make sure that you look again at the consulting firms. Look at their websites, look at their interview process pages. They have so much valuable information and give you a great deal of content about what makes good case solving, what they're looking for, and it gives you kind of a running start on some of those expectations. Another piece is really cultivating your ability to do math quickly. Most people will say that they're great at math, they're really quantitative. I agree with that, but I also know that there's some differences when you have to do math under a clock and also under the stress conditions of a case interview. So practicing this can be valuable in the long run. The additional activity is starting with the approach of structuring a case. Being structured in the interview process, having structured thinking is one of the most kind of honed in and critical areas that are being evaluated when you're in the case interview process. So there's a lot of different ways that you can practice that, whether you're using a tool like Rocket Blocks or just simply reading through a set of cases. Really beginning with the structuring versus solving from start to finish is going to benefit you again in the long run. If you do your case well from the start, you'll have an overall good case. If the start doesn't really work that well, if the structure isn't strong, if it's not meaty, if it's not comprehensive, you're ultimately not going to have a great case interview. And then finally, think about conversations. If you have students and you're in a business school and they've come from consulting, talk to them. If you have classmates who did their internships in consulting, talk to them. If there are recent alumni that you can speak to, also have conversations with them. If you happen to be someone who's not currently in business school, you can find a lot of these professionals on LinkedIn. You can find them as alumni of your institution, whether you went to an undergrad program or a graduate program. So really make sure that you talk to people because they're going to be very helpful in advising you and giving you some great information about how to get started. Back a little bit to using these resources in the process of learning, drilling, and practicing. So when you're just learning the process, looking at the firms, looking at some of the sample cases can be great to get a sense of the landscape. When you do some of these drills on your own, using a tool like Rocket Blocks, using some of the case books, and then also reading some of these kind of key industry and business related articles is going to be valuable. And then in your practice, you can use case books from a variety of different MBA programs. There's also some case trainer books and a set of podcasts. So you can access some of these resources and then apply them at these different stages of your practice. With all that in mind, let me share a couple of next steps from this introduction to practicing for case interviews. One of the questions that is often a common piece of discussion when I'm working with my clients and with different student groups, how much practice is really necessary? The question that's often asked very specifically, how many cases do I need to practice? How many weeks do I need to practice? Some of these things that you're looking for a very quantifiable answer. Well, one of the things that I think is fair, although it may not be the best answer that you're looking for, is it really depends on where you begin. So every individual needs a different degree of practice, and it begins on your background and your baseline. So if you have a lot of consulting-like experience, or in fact, you were a consultant in your prior life or currently, you may not need as much practice. If you come from a field that isn't quite consulting-like, which means project-based, you might need more practice. If you have a lot of analytics in your background, that's going to be a factor. If you have awareness of diverse industries, that's a consideration. If you've had to work in jobs where you've structured problems, that will also be a deciding factor. And then you also want to think about how you react to stress conditions, because the more practice we have, the more iteration, the more variation we've seen, we can handle things and sort of be prepared when they come at us. The whole point of this is not every person is going to practice in the same way. And so if you're in a large program where you have a lot of people preparing, just because your friend, your classmate did a certain number of things, it doesn't mean that that's exactly the right number for you. So I would self-assess, really think about where you are, and then build a practice plan that makes sense for you given your experience and background. Back then to what I spoke about earlier. What you really want to think about here is deep practice. This isn't about quantity. It's not about the number of cases that you practice. It's really much more about how you practice and how you apply the lessons from your practice and the learnings from your practice to get better and better at your case solving. What this means is that a decent amount of attention should be given to your review of the feedback that you're getting. So you practice a case, and then your partner or whoever you're practicing with gives you some feedback, and you really need to think about that feedback. That feedback then will define the kind of drills that you should be doing, the area of attention that you should focus on for a short period of time before you go back and practice a little bit more. If you're doing drills, you need to do self-feedback. You need to look at solutions and evaluate and kind of grade yourself, if you will, and then continue in this process. Probably one of the best things that you can do for yourself is for every case you practice, if it takes you an hour, to maybe spend at least an hour reviewing that feedback and then maybe a couple hours doing drills after that case. In the long run, that investment of time is really going to pay off. Let me just define a few next steps that you may want to consider. There's a number of practice activities that I have created videos for that will focus your attention on these various drills. They will also give you some practice problems or techniques along with some commentary. So there's a few areas that you can explore, including market sizing, brainstorming, consulting analytics, some mini cases, and then the reading business review area to learn a little bit more about the content areas that could be useful in your case solving. With that said, Thank you for taking the time to listen to this conversation, and good luck in your case preparation.